Hi there folks, welcome back to the IBN Andy Fishing channel. I hope you're doing really well. It is review time again in our little corner of YouTube, and as you've probably guessed from the thumbnail, we've got a set of wading boots on review. This time around we are reviewing the Patagonia Forra Wading Boots and the Forra Traction Boot Wading Stud Kit that you can buy separately to go with it with the boots. Interesting thing about the Forras, even before you get them out of the box, is they're not actually made by Patagonia. They're made in northern Italy by an Italian company called Fitwell, who actually have most of their reputation in outdoor boots, particularly in canyoning boots. I was really interested actually just to go onto a couple of Facebook canyoning groups for European canyoners and just ask what the reputation for Fitwell was like as a canyoning boot. And overwhelmingly the feedback was good. People were saying, yeah, excellent boots, top quality, one of the absolute best canyoning boots available. They did all say they're a little bit expensive compared to the other stuff on the market, but actually they are worth the money. The guys who use them absolutely love them. So a little bit of background with Fitwell, the company on the box there. Yeah, they've got a great name in outdoor boots in other industries, and Patagonia clearly have contracted them to build this specific boot for Patagonia, the Forra Wading Boot. And in the box it's pretty straightforward really. You've got your two boots, there's a shock, and you do get a spare set of purple laces in there. I don't know what I've done with mine, but you do get a spare set of laces in the box. Nothing else in there really. It's pretty simple and straightforward. I'm going to pop the box out of the way. I'm going to take one of the boots out because I'm going to need that. Pop this box out of the way. And then with the traction stud kit, you buy these separately. There's a little box, you get a little tool to screw them in, which I'll talk about in a bit, and you get, I think it's 26 wide auger tungsten carbide studs, and again we'll talk about those in a bit. That's what you get. That is the Forra boot as it comes. A little bit different in terms of wading boots. Looks a little bit different, I thought, straight away. They are relatively lightweight. I've just weighed this one at just over 640 grams, I think it was, which actually, by wading boot standards, is pretty lightweight. They feel light on the hand, they definitely feel light on the foot, and this is my actual boot. This is one of the ones that I've been wearing for the entire season. And I tried to work it out, and it's difficult with my diary, but I think I've done something like 110 days on the water in these. So they've had a fair old kicking. That's quite a lot of use. We cover quite a lot of ground here in Derbyshire. Mixed use, slightly heavier wading on the Derwent, lighter on the Dove. They've also been in salt water a couple of times. One of the ways that Patagonia have managed to keep the weight down on these is actually with the materials they've used. And the standout here is there's actually quite a lot of this grey cordura on there. Rather than this being a leather or sort of a fake leather style thing, it's actually quite lightweight. In fact, if I look through the ankle here, and I can actually see through to the other side. There's a little bit of padding in there, it feels like, but only a very small amount, and the rest of it is cordura. With those holes in there, it means they drain really quickly. They don't need to build drainage holes in because it's already draining out of the fabric as it comes. Nice high collar, as you'd expect on a wading boot. Fair amount of ankle protection on here. It comes up nice and high, so if you're in slightly different terrain or if you're going to be walking in them, your ankles are fairly well protected there. Again, it's not big heavy protection, it's not big heavy clumsy protection, but there is enough there. Because they're made out of synthetics entirely, they also dry really quickly. There's nothing here that's going to soak up any excess water. There's no like spare foams or anything in there. So you're getting a boot here that's also going to dry out really quickly because of the materials that it's made out of. One of the other things that's obvious straight away on the Forra boot is the lack of metal. There is absolutely no metal in the production of these boots at all. So if you're one of the people who's using them in salt water, actually there's a real advantage here in that they haven't used any materials that are going to corrode in salt water. So you know you can take these in and out of the salt, use them repeatedly, not have to worry about rinsing them out with the salt water necessarily, and you're still going to get a boot that's going to last. Big tick for the saltwater anglers, that's for sure. There's a nice big sturdy toe box here at the front, so if you're wading around boulders and rocks and stuff like that, and it can be one of those horrible things when you're out wading, just sort of progressing up a river and kicking something and not realising it. It can be really, really sharp, particularly if your boots are a little bit tight. So nice big sturdy box at the front there. You can see that I'm pushing this pretty hard, it's not moving. You know your toes are comfortable and safe in there, and there's a little bit more room if your feet do swell up a bit in the cold water. We come down here to the sole, and this is the Vibram Mars sole, which is supposed to be fairly sticky rubber. They talk about having these sort of hexagrip style studs in them already built in to give you extra traction. It's heavily cleated, there's a lot of surface contact area here. In truth, of my own usage, because I put the studs in them straight away in the shop, or because the guys in the shop put the studs in for me, I should say, I can't say too much about the performance of the sole on its own. The sole is tried and tested. Vibram are good at this stuff, and Patagonia and Fitwell are likely to have chosen the best sole for the job. As I say, it's just in this review, I've only tested them with the studs in. So that's what you get out of the box. That's how Patagonia described them. In the shop, I had some reservations about these. Not just about the fact they were lightweight, even about the construction of them. I sort of looked, there were little things where I thought, I'm not quite sure about this. So I spent quite a lot of time working in fishing shops. I've done 8 years working in fishing retail in total. So I've seen a lot of wading boots. I've seen a lot of wading boot returns. I sort of feel like I know where things are likely to go wrong if they're going to go wrong. And other than the fact that they're a lot lighter than most wading boots, and that immediately worried me. The big thing here that I looked at and I thought, do you know what, I'm not so sure about that, was this area just around here that's sort of in between the sole and the upper that is very, very clearly stuck down to material. The other times I've seen this with wading boots, it generally hasn't gone very well. It's generally an area of quite significant weakness, particularly on the instep of both boots because there's a join there. And joins in combination with adhesive are generally not a good thing when you're talking about a product that's going to be underwater lots, dry and wet. The adhesives tend not to like it. I was a little bit nervous about how these boots were going to perform. I had also been warned that they are quite a narrow fit. And actually that is true. They are a little bit narrow, particularly when you first get them. But I did find this Cordura top here, the upper, does soften up very, very quickly. Wasn't really a problem for me. I've got relatively narrow feet, don't get me wrong, but wasn't really a problem for me. I actually found them really comfortable in the end. So we'll get on to performance, particularly longevity, because I think with wading boots, that's a big thing. You want a wading boot you can trust that's going to last. And just for a couple of seconds here, I am going to pick up my boot, because I want to talk about the areas on the wading boot where possibly you'd have thought things might have gone wrong and they haven't, specifically around that adhesive. This has been a real shock. I'm not going to lie, this has been a real shock. I really thought this was going to be a problem. I didn't like the look of it out of the box. I just thought, particularly on the instep there, on the bridge of the foot, I thought that was an area that was likely to come loose. And in 100 plus days of wearing them, dry and wet, all sorts of terrain, it has barely moved. I have no idea what sort of adhesive, what sort of witchcraft it is that Fitwell are using, but it has barely moved. There's a couple of little wrinkles and creases, but I'm actually not that concerned about it because it's all so well stuck down. It's all held in place so well that there really isn't a whole lot there to go wrong. So my immediate worry, that sort of, is this stuck down properly? Is this going to hold in place? Yeah, it seems like it is. As I say, in saltwater and freshwater, really very little has got to that adhesive and it's all held in place. And because of that, the rest of the boot has stayed in condition as well. That Cordura nylon mesh on the upper's doing really, really well. There's a little bit of fuzz to it, but again, it's not something I'm particularly concerned about. In terms of rips or tears or stitches out of place, I cannot find a single one. I've gone over both of my boots with a fine-tooth comb. I cannot find a stitch that has moved on either of these boots, which for the amount of use they've had over the spring, summer, autumn and now winter is really impressive. Even those lace eyelets there, those Cordura eyelets that again you would look at as an area of weakness on a lot of wading boots, this can be a real problem, the eyelets. They have not moved. There is not a stitch out of place. There's no abrasion on them. They look exactly the same as the one that's on the brand new boot. They've done really, really well. The loop on the heel there to help you get them on. Again, I use this every single time I put boots on. I'm one of the people that uses that. Not a stitch out of place, even with a load of sand in there at the moment. Not a stitch out of place on that. It's not moved. It doesn't look like it's going to move. In truth, other than some general sort of wear, a little bit of furring on the Cordura. In terms of the uppers of these boots, you would not know they've been used. They were in fantastic condition still. Very, very impressive on the materials from Fitwell because I've never seen a wading boot like this, at this sort of weight, take this much punishment so well. We'll come down to that sole then, that Vibram Mars sole, and because this is quite soft compound rubber, because this is kind of sticky soft rubber, there's a little bit more wear on the sole. I am expecting that, that's not unexpected. I don't think necessarily this is a bad thing, but you'll see there are some little punctures and there's some little cuts and a bit more abrasion maybe. You'd expect that on the sole. That's the bit, it's the bit that's taken the biggest kicking really, is that rubber sole. But again, nothing's moved. There's no sort of obvious areas of adhesive that could come off. I must admit, I don't know how the sole is fitted to the welt of the shoe. You can't see it, but however they've fitted it very, very well because it is not flinched. Other than a little bit of abrasion and a few nicks and bits and pieces here and there. Again, there's very, very little to show between the old and the new boot here. It's doing really well. Coming down underneath here, and this is the area where you'd expect to see the maximum amount of wear from a boot that's been worn quite a lot. And in truth, it is where we've seen the maximum amount of wear. You can see there some of those hex studs that they're talking about have worn down a little bit. They're perhaps softened a touch, and you're maybe not going to get the level of grip out of those that you might have done ordinarily. In terms of major faults and defects, there is nothing. The only real obvious area of change here is the fact that just those little nicks and nobbles on the hexagonal shapes on those studs, they have worn down a little bit. With the amount of miles I've done in these boots over the last 9 months, I'd sort of expect that. And for that reason, I'm actually really, really pleased that I went with the studs. In truth, it was never not going to be an option for me. I was always going to put the studs in there. Having gone through lots of different sole types, lots of different Vibrams and Michelins and stuff like that, I haven't found any rubber soles that I genuinely think give me enough grip, either on slippy grass, and that can be a problem getting in and out of some of these rivers, or on those rocks that have just got that little film of algae or moss on it, that real slippy stuff. I find the rubber compounds never really give me the grip on that, whereas if you've got a stud that just bites through it and gets to the hard bit of the stone, just gives you a bit more grip. For me, certainly, it gives me a bit more security, so for that reason, I would always put the studs in these boots. I haven't actually used all of the studs. I went for a sort of a 5 and 5 configuration just to start with the plan being that I was going to play around with it and see if I could find something that gave me more or less grip. In truth, I haven't felt like I've needed to change them. I've not had any slips or trips or anything like that. They're not quite as long in the stud maybe as I'd like. I'd like them to be a little bit longer maybe, but it's not much really. I've had plenty of grip. There's never really been a problem in terms of keeping myself pinned to the riverbed or onto the grass at all. And having had 9 months of almost constant use, that tungsten carbide is showing a little bit of signs of rust and corrosion in there. Again, with a mixture of salt and freshwater use, you'd sort of expect that. But I will say actually, in terms of the studs themselves, not showing that much wear. It might be something for me to consider going forward, that maybe I'll put a few of the extra studs in here just coming up for the winter where things are going to be a little bit higher in the water heights, a little bit slippier maybe. Perhaps a couple more studs in here for me might not be a bad idea. Talking about the studs a little bit more, we'll talk about this traction kit, the Forra traction kit. There is a little QR code in the box that sends you a link to show you how to put the studs in. It's a little bit fiddly to start with because you have to push down on them pretty hard, but actually this tool's pretty well made. We had a funny couple of minutes in the shop between the three of us trying to figure out exactly how to get these studs in, but actually just having a little bit of a play around with it and a couple of practice runs, if you just sort of angle the boot slightly and then twist round and in, those studs soon go in there. And as you've seen there, all the studs that went in February, they're all still in there now, so big thumbs up to that, because I know that sometimes with the removable studs or the studs that you can add in, they're not actually that durable, they can end up coming off and that'd be really frustrating. Not been a problem on these. Every stud that we put in February is still in these boots now. So that is pretty much it, folks, in terms of the boot. It's an incredibly lightweight boot, made out of materials you might not expect, made in a way that we might not be familiar with as fly anglers, but actually the canyon and boot market is very familiar with these construction processes, and they've got to be durable for what those guys do. It's a boot that's made in Italy, not in China or Korea, so it's something that's European made, so for those of you who are big on that stuff, that's going to be important. It's a boot that dries very quickly, it's a boot that drains very quickly, it gives you the ankle support you want, it's a boot that you can fit your own studs into a pattern of your own liking. It ticks all the boxes, it really does. We've got to talk about the price box here, and actually at £225, I don't think this is a particularly expensive modern wading boot. There are far, far more expensive boots on the market than the Patagonia Forra. I actually think at 225 quid for an Italian-made boot, you pay more than that for a standard pair of Italian leather shoes. I actually think these are an absolute bargain. Of course, with my boots, you've got to factor in the cost of the studs, and at 50 quid for the studs, and the 26 studs in the box, do we say? They're a little bit more expensive. They're going to bump the price of these up to 275, but actually, even at that money, I still think this is probably one of the best wading boots on the market. For me personally, I wouldn't use them without the studs, but I know there are people out there who maybe do some salmon fishing and they're not allowed in a boat with a boot that's got studs on, so you can't fit them. Leave the studs off these things, use them for everything. You've got a good all-rounder in the Forra. Folks, I'm going to leave this one here now, but thank you very much for watching the review. I'd be super interested in the comment section to hear from any of you folks who have actually been using the Forra boots. Always love hearing other people's feedback, particularly about the fit and the durability. I found they were tight to start with, but softened up. I found the durability has been excellent. If anyone's had the same experience or had a contrary experience, get down in the comment section and let me know, because I really like hearing what you guys think about these things. Thank you very much for watching this review, really appreciate it. As I say, get in the comment section, let us know the thoughts, and Ivy and I are going to see you guys again soon for some more wading, some more reviewing, and some more fly fishing very soon. Take care, folks. Bye bye.